again, I'm struck by the comprehensiveness of the plan that you have launched, and I highly recommend that everyone out there read the plan, which is much more than a plan. It is really a strategy with a roadmap, complete with milestones, with due dates, which is very impressive. Let me now turn back, and what I'd like to do is ask a question to dig deeper on some of the things you said in your presentation, and then maybe turn to some more general questions that I think are common across the 3 different continents. And if I could start with Ms. Lagunas. As was just said by Minister Johnson, but Mexico, like every country, is confronted with some unique problems. You mentioned in your intervention that one of them is the wide variance in incomes, from what's a rather poor population in some parts of the country to a growing middle class to a wealthy class. And I'm curious that in terms of your change management strategy, which I think is essential for making something like this work, how did you engage across the population with such variance?
Pues sí, así es. México es un país muy desigual. Tenemos 50 millones de pobres y aquí es donde la administración del presidente es donde está enfocando gran parte de la política pública, de las reformas que se hicieron hace los últimos meses y las acciones que todo el gobierno está haciendo en hacer un país más justo. ¿Cómo entra la tecnología en esto? Y lo hemos de cierta forma los 3 hablado. La tecnología entra porque de verdad es un detonador de economías, es un detonador de bienestar, es un detonador de ejercer libertades también, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cómo la estrategia digital ayuda a que dentro del gobierno y fuera del gobierno la gente se pueda comprometerse, ¿no? a llevar a cabo estas acciones? Quisiera hablar de los grandes retos y cómo estamos haciéndolo dentro del gobierno. Dentro del gobierno tenemos obstáculos y gran parte de estos obstáculos se refieren a infraestructura, se refieren a política pública y se refieren a la cultura. Entonces, en el tema de política pública, para que la política pública tenga dientes, ¿no? y se pueda hacer, que el gobierno se pueda comprometer a hacerlo, pues necesita ser como parte de las obligaciones que los funcionarios tenemos que hacer. Así es que fue muy importante que la estrategia digital estuviera dentro del Plan Nacional de Desarrollo, lo cual es una obligación para todo el gobierno. Ahí es donde está escrito todas las acciones que se tienen que hacer. Y ahí está esta política pública con acciones muy específicas en temas de educación, en cómo vamos a utilizar la tecnología y a transformar el sistema educativo. Estamos hablando de contenidos, estamos hablando de todo el ecosistema de educación, estamos hablando de cómo ampliar el sistema de salud, cómo llevar más salud a la población, estamos hablando de detonar la economía, que es la gran promesa para los próximos meses, detonar nuevas economías digitales, y esto quiere decir generar más demanda, desarrollar más demanda, generar más oferta también. Estamos hablando de seguridad. En un país como el nuestro tenemos que enfocar también la tecnología en temas de desastres por fenómenos naturales y también en temas de seguridad pública. Y estamos hablando de la transformación de gobierno. Bueno, todo esto está dentro del Plan Nacional de Desarrollo con líneas de acción muy específicas que están también dentro de la estrategia digital. La tecnología, la realidad es que hoy está ahí, está lista. Hoy podemos hacer que el gobierno interopere, en vez de ser islas aisladas y que cada una de las dependencias tenga su sistema. La gran promesa del gobierno digital, del e-government, es hacer que todas estas islas, que todas las dependencias interoperen, que las bases de datos, que la información se pueda comunicar de un lugar a otro, para que el ciudadano sea el principal beneficiario. Es decir, que yo como gobierno nunca más le vuelva a pedir al ciudadano un documento que ya el mismo gobierno tiene. Que en vez de tener 5,000 sitios diferentes, tengamos un solo sitio de gobierno donde el ciudadano pueda desde cualquier lugar, a cualquier hora y desde cualquier dispositivo hacer un trámite del gobierno. Y esto tiene un beneficio económico, tiene un beneficio en corrupción, tiene un beneficio inmediato en los ciudadanos. La tecnología está ahí y la estamos adoptando. Estamos trabajando muy de la mano con los CIOs de todas las dependencias para homologar la infraestructura, sobre todo para poder tener la base tecnológica necesaria para poder hacer realidad la estrategia digital. Eso ya está pasando. Hicimos una política de tecnología que habla de cómo comprar mejor, ser más eficientes en la compra y en el uso de la tecnología. Y en el tercer punto, hablando de la cultura, el tema dentro del gobierno es tan difícil cambiar que tenemos que hacer que estos agentes de cambio que yo hablaba al principio sean los que empiecen, y al ver los beneficios, y los beneficios directamente incluso en la gente que invierte, que gasta dentro del gobierno o que hace los procesos, empezar a ver los beneficios en eficiencias, en costos, esto se empieza a adoptar. Esto ya lo estamos viendo. Créanme, ha sido un proceso muy doloroso de cambio, y agradezco a toda la gente que ha estado involucrada dentro del gobierno, pero muy pronto vamos a poder tener plataformas hacia el ciudadano que van a volver el gobierno muy eficiente. Hablando hacia afuera, me parece que la mejor forma de comprometer a la ciudadanía en un proyecto de tecnología como en un proyecto de uso de las tecnologías de la información, es qué beneficio hay para mí, el famoso what's in it for me. Y este beneficio es trabajando de la mano con la gente. Por eso es que es tan importante que el gobierno trabaje en colaboración con la industria, con la academia, con los ciudadanos, con organismos de sociedad civil y con la gente que está literalmente en su teléfono participando en redes sociales. Que participen, y tenemos ejemplos muy claros de participación ciudadana, y es la mejor forma de comprometer a la gente en proyectos de gobierno, cuando sienten que forman parte de ese gobierno, de las decisiones que se están tomando, pero también que el beneficio regresa de manera inmediata. Así es que estamos trabajando como dentro de gobierno y hacia afuera de gobierno, y creo que aquí la clave es tender ese puente, y ese puente es la participación, la colaboración y los resultados. Todo esto es lo que nos ha demostrado que va a hacer que la gente se comprometa en estos proyectos, y también el gobierno. Tenemos retos muy grandes, por ejemplo la conectividad, hablando de la conectividad, y no sé si puedo hablar ahorita de esto o después hable de esto, pero es uno de los grandes retos.
I'd like to
y
come
podemos
back to
regresar.
broadband in
Perfecto.
general.
Okay. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And I think you've described what has to be the hardest challenge, which is this change management and getting people to accept some pain for longer term gain. Dr. Chen, I'm struck by the fact that Taiwan is near the top of a lot of the different metrics describing the digital economy. But I'm curious, at that level, are you beginning to feel some resistance? Are there issues now cropping up? I'm from Europe. We have a huge employment problem going on in Europe, and you're beginning to feel a little resistance against technology in Europe and in other parts of the world. And I'm curious, do you feel this in Taiwan? And how are you dealing with it? And how are you keeping this social inclusion going, as was just described in Mexico?
In terms of resistance to technology, I think in the case of Taiwan, it's relatively minor. However, there are indeed cases like that. Unavoidably, for some ICT technology and its application, we cause some loss of employment, because some of the ICT technologies used to replace human power, right? So in that case, I think it's important for the government to also devise some kinds of strategy to ease that kinds of pain. For example, if a certain sector of the population will be negatively impacted, I think some kinds of strategy need to be devised to help those people transition to a newer type of economy or help them find new employment. So in that aspect, we have started a public or education crowd in the hope of setting up additional training program that people after school, right, can still go there and learn new technology and maybe find other employment elsewhere. But I think it's important. I think whenever we deploy any kind of technology that has a potential of replace some of the existing work, then we need to find a company policy to ease those pain.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me just end this round with Minister Johnson. And one of the things OECD is known for, we like data. We like indicators because we like an evidence base from which to do analysis. And in reading your plan, I saw an emphasis on transparency of pricing as one of your key tenets. And I'd be curious if you could maybe explain what you mean by that and why you think it's important.
It's very important because I said one of the challenges that we have, or one of our priorities is about connectivity. And even as we connect larger parts of the country, what we found is that connectivity is actually very expensive. It's very expensive to roll out the internet to different parts of the country. And that's because we have challenges in terms of the cost of the right of way, the cost of the land that we put our base stations on. And so what has happened is that because a lot of these companies, all of them are private sector companies, they have commercial orientation. And what they do is that, when they have these very high costs, they then just pass that cost to the consumer. And so right now, in terms of access to the internet, it is actually very expensive in Nigeria. And when you're talking about an inclusion agenda, that just does not support that agenda. So we have a very, like you rightly noticed, a very important part of our broadband agenda is that transparency of pricing. And we're working to ensure that any cost that goes into delivering a broadband network, we are working to bring it down to the barest minimum, using again the power of government through policy recommendations, through working with state governments to let them understand that you really don't tax this infrastructure when it's being developed. You tax the benefits of the infrastructure, so the e-commerce companies and the businesses that are going to come out of the infrastructure is what you tax to get your revenue, not the actual infrastructure itself. And in doing that as well, when you talk about data and empirical statistics, we were actually one of the first members of the Alliance for Affordable Internet, which is, I guess it's an NGO in a sense, supported by the World Wide Web Foundation, to look at how we can get much more affordable internet, particularly across the developing economies. They've done a lot of research in Nigeria, in Kenya, and I think in South Africa, and they're looking at what are the factors that impede the access to the internet, and what are the factors that actually make the internet much more expensive. We're using a lot of that research to drive some of the policies that we're coming up with right now. So that again supports that transparency. And that transparency is important because when you make policies as a government institution, you've got to make them based on data. You've got to make them based on consultation with the rest of the stakeholders in the industry, so that when you actually come up with that policy, there's a clear understanding of where you're coming from. So that's where that transparency of price and transparency of cost comes in. So it's really quite important for us, and that's why it's actually right there in the broadband agenda.
Thank you. And again, I find these policies to be very enlightened. I wish all countries could have. Let me just end, because as we said at the outset, this is much more than just about information communication technologies. This is really about the modern economy and how it moves forward. And I just want to ask all three panelists kind of a general, more economic question about, as you develop and go to implement your digital agenda strategies, how do you balance between your champion firms, your kind of incumbents that are there in your countries now, and the unborn kind of fledgling startups that you hope to nurture And in the same way, I'd be interested to know how you balance between trying to generate indigenous domestic growth while at the same time taking advantage of some of the leapfrog opportunities that may present themselves from foreign investment. And maybe I start with Minister Johnson, and then we'll work down the line.
I mean, I think that's a great question, and that's because that's one of the things we're faced with. So we have a very successful ICT industry, like I said, 10.4% to GDP. But one of the things we found out when we started looking at this in a lot more depth was that it was actually dominated by multinationals. So any multinational that was worth its salt was in Nigeria. IBM, HP, and even our telcos were multinationals. And we found out that our local companies were really just playing at the fringes of what was actually a very successful market. So we took a decision, and that was that we had to create a much more level playing field for everybody, both the multinationals and the local companies. We had to create opportunities for these unborn startups that you talked about to emerge and to grow and to thrive. And the way we did that in a number of ways. One thing we did not do for sure was to have protectionist policies. We didn't want to have policies that says that if you're multinational, you can't do this or you can't do that, because we find that those really, at the end of the day, they hurt everybody. They don't help everybody. We wanted a win-win situation, so we set out these guidelines for Nigeria content. And those guidelines were developed in collaboration with the entire industry. We had the multinationals there, the local companies there, big multinationals, small local companies. And basically what we said was that we need to build an industry that is more reflective of Nigeria. We need to build an industry that will actually sustain this tremendous growth that we're seeing. And so the kind of things that we did was to say, number one, we've all got to support the ecosystem. So what you see right now is that government is supporting the ICT ecosystem, whether it's hardware, software, services. The multinationals are coming in and actually supporting, actually funding some of these startups that we see right now, because they have a direct impact or input into their business. They're part of the value chain of their businesses. We have companies like our large mobile network operators who have developed an app store, and they're actually taking on a lot of these applications and putting them on their own local app store. So that's actually supporting that startup ecosystem. So it's really what we're doing is just ensuring that in our local content guidelines, there are two things that we're trying to do. Is really just state the responsibilities of every single stakeholder. Multinationals, you're doing great business in Nigeria, but you have a responsibility to support the local ecosystem, and they bought into that. Local companies, you're doing very well, but you're small, but you have to scale up. If you have to merge to come together to build up better companies, or to build up bigger companies, yes. If you have to increase your capital so that you can actually do more when it comes to manufacturing, you need to do that. So you also have a responsibility to scale up and be able to compete much better. For the startups, it's a case of, you have to be innovative and creative in whatever you do. So we won't support a startup that really doesn't solve a local problem or doesn't actually give a different solution to what is a perennial problem. So those are the kind of things that in our Nigeria content guidelines that will really help us to have a much more balanced industry that represents multinationals, local companies, and all that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lagunas.
En México, lo que estamos haciendo para desarrollar el ecosistema son muchas cosas en paralelo, sobre todo porque necesitamos activarlo muy rápido. Me gustaría hablar en primer lugar de un fondo que hay dentro de la Secretaría de Economía que se llama ProSoft, que lo que busca es desarrollar el ecosistema ETIs en México. Este fondo, y de hecho lo acabamos de presentar hace unas semanas, los cambios a este fondo, y lo que busca es que se desarrolle la demanda y la oferta, pero también no solo de manera local, sino de manera internacional. Es decir, que México sea un hub de innovación y de desarrollo de tecnología, así como de consumo. Por otro lado, la gran reforma de telecomunicaciones, una de las 11 reformas que se pasaron en los últimos meses. La reforma de telecomunicaciones lo que hace es cambiar por completo el ecosistema de telecom. Esta reforma de telecomunicaciones va a permitir que haya competencia. Y el hecho de que haya competencia en un país genera una gran oportunidad para bajar los precios y mejorar los servicios, y en países como México eso es lo que puede cerrar las brechas de la diferencia que hay, sobre todo en temas de conectividad. Esta reforma de telecomunicaciones también pone a México en el 8º país en reconocer el acceso a las telecomunicaciones y a Internet de banda ancha como un derecho constitucional. Esto es enorme, porque al ser un derecho constitucional le pone una obligación al Estado de llevar Internet, de llevar las telecomunicaciones, incluido Internet, a toda la población. Hay un compromiso para que en los próximos años, para el 2018, el 70% de los hogares tenga Internet y el 85% de las empresas. Esto es duplicar lo que teníamos hace año y medio. Y si es que esta reforma de telecomunicaciones es realmente valiente, progresista y pone a México en completamente otra cancha de juego. En tercer lugar, dentro del gobierno, ya como políticas muy enfocadas, hicimos una política de tecnología. Lo que busca hacer esta política de tecnología es que el gobierno compre mejor tecnología. Hoy México, a diferencia de países asiáticos y europeos, hoy México solamente 1% de sus compras de tecnología son a empresas locales, versus, por ejemplo, el 80% en otros países. ¿Qué estamos buscando hacer? Aumentar el mercado local, también aumentar el mercado internacional, es decir, no queremos quitarle mercado a nadie. Hay una oportunidad enorme de crecimiento, pero necesitamos desarrollar el mercado local. Tenemos compromisos de gobierno, por ejemplo, de dar tabletas a los niños de quinto y sexto de primaria, y hoy en México no pudimos hacer las tabletas, tuvimos que importarlas. Lo que estamos buscando es que todas estas políticas y compromisos del gobierno, como dar hardware, desarrollar software, generar contenidos, se puedan aplicar en México, es decir, generar una demanda, porque tenemos la capacidad. Tenemos más de 100,000 ingenieros que se gradúan al año en México, y creo que tenemos que enfocar mucho la oferta y demanda para que se genere. Y otra de las herramientas o de las políticas que hicimos para generar y desarrollar el mercado son ciertos decretos que salen de la oficina del presidente y que ayudan a empujar iniciativas muy importantes, como la iniciativa de datos abiertos. Los datos abiertos generan economías muy importantes, así es que en los próximos meses vamos a ver cómo el gobierno empieza a abrir bases de datos que van a incentivar la generación de mucha innovación, de empleos, de empresas, y decretos como el de la ventanilla única. Todo esto en su conjunto, ¿no? Todas estas políticas y todas estas estrategias que se están haciendo, lo único que buscan es generar un ecosistema de desarrollo.
Thank you very much. We're running long on time, so Dr. Chen, if you could quickly finish, and then we can move on to the next panel.
Okay, so apparently a bigger established company doesn't need much help from the government, right? So in Taiwan, we have a mechanism that set up by the government that can help the small and medium-sized company. As I mentioned earlier, more than 35 years ago, our government set up several public research institutes with the aim of developing certain category of technology. And by doing that, and with those public research institutes working very closely with the industry, especially smaller scale company or emerging company, it can ease some of the risk and capital outlay for those small companies in terms of doing research and development. In a sense, it gives a leg up to those small companies. So that's the way we help a small and medium-sized scale company. And we do it in various areas, both in hardware and in software as well. So for example, in the institute that I currently serve as a CTO, the III, we are focused on the software area. So we do research in the area that our government policymaker specify, and the result of our research, we do a technology transfer to the small company, mostly small company, although we don't limit out to small company, but mostly those are the companies that need help. And usually a bigger company find working with government very cumbersome as well. So mostly it's the small and medium-sized company that benefit.
Thank you very much. I think all we've done here is touch on many issues that will resonate throughout the next few days. Please join me in thanking the panelists on this first panel.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for a wonderful session on a very, very important topic. So if you just remain, we'd like to provide you with a small gift for your participation. Thank you.